Two brothers, kicked out of the system at 15 and 18, inherit a worthless patch of forest. But what they discovered buried there would not only save them, it would show them the true meaning of home. And if you've ever felt lost, like you had nowhere to go, then this story is for you. Stick around, maybe even people who've had to fight for their place in the world. The bus smelled like disinfectant and despair. It was the same smell that clung to the hallways of every group home, every social worker's office, every sad beige room I'd ever been forced to call a bedroom for a few months. For the last 3 years, since I turned 15, that smell had been the backdrop to my life. Now, on my 18th birthday, it was the smell of freedom, and it was terrifying. My brother Sam sat beside me, his head resting against the vibrating window. He was 15, all sharp angles and a quiet fury that he kept locked down tight behind his eyes. He hadn't spoken more than 10 words since we'd been dropped at the bus station that morning. The house parents, a tired couple named the Millers, had given us a perfunctory goodbye. "You're a man now, Leo," Mr. Miller had said, clapping me on the shoulder with a hand that felt like a bag of loose gravel. "Time to make your own way." What he meant was, my legal adulthood meant they no longer got a check for me. And since the state liked to keep siblings together, Sam was my problem now too. They'd packed us 2 duffel bags with our meager clothes, a Ziploc bag of sandwiches that were already starting to get soggy, and $100 in cash. One final gift, a severance package from a childhood we never really had. In my pocket, I could feel the stiff corners of the envelope. It had arrived a week ago, forwarded from our last known address before the Millers. It was from a lawyer's office in a town I'd never heard of, Arbor Creek, West Virginia. Inside was a single folded document, a deed. According to the dry, legalistic language, our maternal grandmother, a woman we hadn't seen since we were toddlers, had passed away. She had left us her only asset, 5 acres of undeveloped woodland just outside of town. There was no house, no money, just a plot number on a county map. The letter included a separate, smaller envelope with a key inside and a hand-drawn map that looked like something out of a pirate story. The lawyer's note was brief. It said our grandmother, Evelyn, had stipulated this be delivered on my 18th birthday. It also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that there were several years of unpaid property taxes, and the county would likely seize the land within 90 days if they weren't settled. A final, cruel joke. "Happy birthday, you're a landowner," and an indebted one at that. I hadn't told Sam about the back taxes. He was already carrying enough. For him, those 5 acres were a fantasy, a lifeline. On the long, rumbling bus ride, it was the only thing we had. A patch of dirt on a map. A place that, in theory, couldn't kick us out. The rain started an hour outside of Charleston, thin, greasy streaks sliding down the window, blurring the already bleak landscape of rusted-out cars and sagging porches. Sam finally stirred. "Is it much further?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Couple more hours," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I unfolded the state map I'd picked up at the station. Arbor Creek was a tiny dot, a place the mapmaker seemed to have included out of pity. I traced the thin red line of the highway with my finger, the paper already soft and worn at the creases. It felt like we were traveling not just across the state, but off the edge of the known world. Every mile took us further from the system that had defined us, and deeper into an unknown that was vast and empty and cold. I looked at Sam, his face pale in the gray light, his expression unreadable. He was depending on me. I was 18 for all of 12 hours, and I was already a guardian, a provider, a navigator, and a liar. I was terrified I was leading him to nothing, to a cold, wet patch of woods where we would finally, truly, be alone. The weight of it felt heavier than the duffel bag at my feet. It was a physical pressure in my chest, a cold knot of fear that the bus station disinfectant couldn't touch. This wasn't just a trip. It was the last, desperate roll of the dice. And I had no idea what would happen if we lost. The bus wheezed to a stop at a gas station that looked like it had been closed for a decade. A single, flickering fluorescent light illuminated a sign that read, Arbor Creek. This was it. The driver grunted and pushed the lever to open the door, letting in a rush of damp, cold air that smelled of wet earth and pine. "End of the line, kids," he said, not unkindly. We were the only ones who got off. The bus pulled away with a hydraulic hiss, its red taillights shrinking into the misty twilight until they vanished completely, leaving us in an unnerving silence broken only by the drip of water from a broken gutter. We were standing under the weak halo of the gas station's light, two kids with two bags on the edge of a two-lane road that disappeared into the dark woods on either side. There was no town in sight, just the road, the gas station, and the trees. A man in a greasy flannel shirt was locking up the convenience store part of the station. He eyed us with the kind of weary suspicion small-town people reserve for strangers who look like trouble. "You lost?" he asked, his voice a low grumble. I cleared my throat. "We're looking for the way to the old Miller property, Evelyn Miller's land." His expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, recognition, maybe pity, passed through his eyes. "Evelyn's place? Ain't nothing out there but trees, and her ghost, maybe." He gestured with his chin down a narrow, unlit dirt road that branched off the main highway. "It's a good 5 miles down that track. You ain't walking it tonight." He was right. The light was failing fast, and the dirt road looked like a tunnel into pure blackness. My heart sank. The $100 from the Millers felt impossibly small. A motel, even for one night, would take a huge chunk of it. "Is there a motel around here?" I asked, dreading the answer. The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "Motel closed down 10 years ago. Nearest one's in Beckley, 30 miles back the way you came." He paused, looking from my face to Sam's, and his hard expression softened just a little. "Look, the church down the road, about half a mile. They leave the porch light on. It's got an overhang. It ain't the Ritz, but it's dry. Better than sleeping in the woods." He didn't wait for a thank you, just turned and walked to his pickup truck, leaving us alone again. Sam looked at me, his eyes wide into gloom. "A church porch?" I forced a shrug, trying to project an air of nonchalant resourcefulness. "It's just for tonight. First thing in the morning, we'll find the land. It'll be an adventure." The words sounded hollow and stupid, a lie so thin it was transparent. Sam didn't call me on it. He just nodded, shouldered his bag, and started walking. That night was one of the longest of my life. We huddled together on the cold concrete steps of the Arbor Creek Community Church, sharing a squashed peanut butter sandwich. The single bulb above us cast long, dancing shadows. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig from the surrounding woods, sounded like a threat. I lay awake long after Sam had drifted into a restless sleep, his breathing shallow and uneven. I listened to the sounds of the night and thought about the word home. For most of my life, it had been a temporary space owned by strangers. Now, it was a piece of paper in my pocket, an abstraction, a promise of a place that might not even be real, 5 miles down a dark road in the middle of nowhere. I clutched the envelope, the sharp edges digging into my palm. It had to be real. It was all we had left. The next morning, we woke up stiff and cold, the gray dawn light filtering through the trees. A woman was arranging flowers by the church door, a kind-faced lady with graying hair. She didn't seem surprised to see us, just gave us a gentle smile and offered us a thermos of hot coffee and 2 granola bars from her purse. "God provides," she said, and I didn't have the heart to tell her it felt like he'd been cutting corners with us lately. The coffee was hot and sweet, and it burned a trail of warmth through my chest. It was a small kindness, but it felt huge. It was enough to fuel the next step. With the sun barely over the horizon, we found the dirt track the gas station attendant had pointed out. The sign for it was almost completely consumed by rust, the words Miller Lane barely legible. The road was more of a suggestion than a path, 2 muddy ruts carved into the earth, disappearing into a thick canopy of pine and oak. We started walking. The air was cool and clean, a stark contrast to the recycled air of the bus. But the silence of the woods was different from the silence of the church porch. It was older, deeper. It felt watchful. The 5 miles felt like 50. Our duffel bags grew heavier with every step, the straps digging into our shoulders. The road was a mess of mud and fallen leaves, and several times we had to navigate around fallen trees. After what felt like hours, my phone, which had a compass app, told me we were getting close to the coordinates on the deed. I started looking for landmarks from the hand-drawn map. "A split oak tree," I muttered, scanning the dense woods. "A creek bed to the left." Sam was the one who saw it. "Leo," he said, his voice quiet. "Look." He was pointing to a set of old, rusted fence posts, nearly swallowed by overgrown bushes. A faded metal sign, shot through with buckshot holes, hung crookedly from one of them. It was impossible to read. This was it. There was no gate, just a gap in the crumbling fence line. We stepped through, leaving the dirt road behind. We were officially on our own land, and it was just woods. Thick, untamed, and indifferent. A dense tangle of undergrowth, towering trees that blocked out the sun, and the damp, loamy smell of decay. There was no clearing, no sign that anyone had lived here or even walked here in a very long time. A wave of profound disappointment washed over me. I had let myself and Sam believe in a fantasy. I had pictured a little meadow, a place to pitch our tent, a space that felt like a refuge. This felt like a trap. "So this is it?" Sam asked, his voice flat. He kicked at a rotten log, and a cloud of insects swarmed out. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just dropped my bag and sank down onto a moss-covered rock, the full weight of our situation crashing down on me. We had traded a series of temporary rooms for a patch of hostile wilderness. We had a tent, $100 that was now closer to 60, and enough food for a day. Winter was a breath on the back of our necks. I had failed. I had led my brother to the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a worthless piece of paper. I put my head in my hands, the rough bark of the trees closing in around me. The silence pressed in, and for the first time, I felt the icy grip of true panic. We were completely and utterly screwed. I let myself wallow for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes of cold, hard despair. Then Sam, who had been wandering in a slow circle, called out again. His voice was different this time. Not disappointed, curious. "Leo, what's this?" I lifted my head. He was standing about 50 feet away, near the base of a huge, ancient-looking oak tree. He was kicking at a mound of earth that was covered in a thick carpet of moss and vines. It was unnaturally symmetrical, a low, rectangular hump in the otherwise chaotic forest floor. I got up and walked over, my boots sinking into the soft ground. As I got closer, I saw what he was looking at. Sticking out from the dirt and vines were two large iron rings, rusted almost black. They were attached to what looked like two flat, heavy wooden doors, set at a low angle into the earth. They were so overgrown, they were almost invisible. If Sam hadn't been kicking at that exact spot, we would have walked right past them. A root cellar. My mind flashed to the stories my mom used to tell. Vague, fragmented memories from before she got sick. Stories about her own childhood, visiting her grandmother's farm. A place with an apple orchard and a cold, dark cellar where they kept jars of peaches and green beans. I had always assumed the farm was long gone, sold off decades ago. But the key in the envelope, it wasn't a house key. It was old, iron, and heavy. I pulled the small envelope from my pocket. The key felt cold and solid in my hand. I knelt down and began tearing away the vines and digging at the packed earth around the edges of the doors with my bare hands. The soil was damp and black. Sam knelt beside me and started helping, his earlier disappointment replaced by a focused energy. The doors were heavy, swollen with years of damp. We cleared the dirt away from the edges, revealing thick, weathered planks of wood bound with iron straps. The lock was a heavy, primitive-looking hasp, and the key slid into the keyhole with a grating scrape of metal on metal. It took all my strength, but with a final, groaning complaint, the lock turned. Together, Sam and I grabbed the iron rings. We pulled. The doors resisted, sealed shut by time and neglect. "Together," I grunted. "On three. 1, 2, 3. We heaved, our muscles straining, our boots sliding in the mud. With a sucking sound and the crack of breaking roots, one of the doors lifted a few inches. A blast of cold, musty air rushed out, a smell like a deep cave, of damp stone and earth and something else, something clean and cold. We propped it open with a thick branch and then worked on the other one. A few minutes later, both doors were open, leaning back against the mound of earth. They revealed a set of steep stone steps leading down into absolute darkness. I took out the small flashlight from my bag, its beam cutting a weak, trembling circle into the black. The steps were slick with moisture, but solid. "Stay here," I told Sam. "Let me check it out first." He didn't argue, just stood at the top, his silhouette framed against the gray sky. I took a deep breath and started down the steps, the flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, my feet touched a smooth stone floor. I swept the light around. We were in a small rectangular room, maybe 10 by 15 feet. The walls were lined with thick, perfectly fitted stones, cool and damp to the touch. Along the walls were empty wooden shelves, their surfaces thick with dust but not rotted. In the corner, a hand pump was mounted over a small, stone-lined basin. But it was the thing in the center of the room that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a large, heavy, metal footlocker. It wasn't dusty or rusted like everything else. It was clean, as if it had been placed there recently. And on top of it was a single, sealed envelope with my name, Leo, written on it in a shaky but elegant hand. The footlocker was locked with a simple combination lock. My name on the envelope felt like a summons from the past. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. The paper was thick and creamy, not like the cheap legal stationery from the lawyer. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of matching paper. The note was short. The combination is the day you and your brother lost your world, the day you came into mine. I'm so sorry, my boy. E. I stared at the words, my heart pounding. The day our parents died. The car accident. I knew the date like it was branded on my soul. October 14th, 10:14. I knelt in front of the footlocker, my fingers fumbling with the small dials. I clicked the numbers into place. 1014. I pulled the shackle. It sprang open with a soft click. For a moment, I just knelt there in the cold, silent dark, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the open lock. This wasn't an accident. None of it was. The deed arriving on my birthday, the key, the map, this cellar, this box. It was a plan. A long, complicated, patient plan set in motion by a woman I barely remembered. Sam called down from the top of the stairs, his voice echoing in the small space. "Leo, is it safe? What's down there?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. "It's safe," I called back, my own voice sounding strange and distant. "Sam, I think you should come see this." I lifted the heavy lid of the footlocker. The inside was lined with oilcloth to keep out the damp, and it was full. The first thing I saw was the money, neat stacks of cash, bundled in paper bands, 50s and 20s, more money than I had ever seen in my life. I didn't count it right away, just stared, my mind struggling to process it. Tucked alongside the cash were several thick manila envelopes, bulging with papers. And on top of everything, there was a stack of letters, tied with a simple blue ribbon. The top letter was addressed to me and Sam. I lifted the bundle out. It felt heavy, weighted with unspoken words. Sam was halfway down the steps, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. The stone room, the open footlocker, the stacks of cash. "Whoa," he breathed, the word hanging in the cold air. He came and knelt beside me, peering into the box. He reached out a tentative hand and touched one of the bundles of money, as if to make sure it was real. I handed him the flashlight and picked up the first letter. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely read the script. "My dearest Leo and Sam," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the worst has happened. But it also means that my plan, my last desperate hope, has worked. It means you found your way home. I know you don't remember me well. I am your grandmother, Evelyn, and I need to tell you a story. It's not a happy one, but it's one you have a right to know. This land, this cellar, it's all that's left of our family's history. It's not much, but it is yours, and it is more valuable than you know." I paused, my throat tight. I looked at Sam. He was watching me, his face a mixture of awe and confusion. I continued reading aloud, my voice echoing slightly off the stone walls. "Our family has owned this land for over 100 years. It was once a thriving farm. My husband, your grandfather, and I, we worked it our whole lives. But times changed. The town withered. We grew old. After your grandfather passed, I was alone. Then, your mother, my beautiful, reckless daughter, met your father. They were so in love. And then they had you two, my precious boys. For a few years, everything was perfect. You would visit in the summers. Leo, you were old enough to help me pick apples. Sam, you were just a baby, but you would laugh whenever I sang to you. Those were the best years of my life." I had to stop again, a memory so faint it was like a dream surfacing. The smell of apples, a woman's voice singing a lullaby. I blinked back tears and kept going. Then the accident happened. and my world and yours fell apart. I tried to get custody. I fought with everything I had, but the state said I was too old, that my income was too low, that this farm was too remote and unsuitable. They took you from me. It broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. It was the greatest failure of my life. The letter went on to explain the next 20 years. A development company, a powerful local family called the Blackwoods, had been trying to buy up all the land in the valley for generations. They wanted to build a resort, a golf course. My grandmother's farm was the last major holdout. They made her lowball offers. Then they started using other tactics. They challenged her property lines. They lobbied the county to raise her taxes. They made her life a living hell. She sold off most of the farm piece by piece just to pay the legal fees and taxes on this last 5-acre parcel. This piece, the one with the old spring and the original cellar. They thought I was just a stubborn old woman, she wrote. They didn't know what I was protecting. This land has one thing the rest of the valley doesn't: a deep, reliable artesian well. The pump in the corner, it never runs dry. In a future where water becomes more valuable than gold, this little patch of woods is a treasure. The Blackwoods know it. It's the real reason they want it. They want the water rights. My eyes went to the hand pump in the corner, a simple cast-iron pump. It looked ancient. All this time, we were sitting on the one thing that made this worthless land priceless. The final pages of the letter were the hardest to read. After they took you, I knew I couldn't fight the state and the Blackwoods at the same time. If they knew you were my heirs, they would have found a way to use you against me, to take the land from you after I was gone. So I had to make a terrible choice. I had to disappear from your lives. I let the state believe I wanted nothing to do with you. I let you believe it too. Every birthday, every Christmas that I sent no card, no gift, it was like a knife in my own heart. But I was protecting your inheritance, this place. I worked odd jobs, saved every penny. The money in this box is everything I scraped together. It's not a fortune, but I hope it's enough to give you a start. There's enough to pay the back taxes, which I've already put into an escrow account with a lawyer in town, a good man named Arthur Gable. His information is in one of the envelopes. The rest is for you, to live on, to fight with. The Blackwoods will come for this land. They won't stop. You have a choice. You can take this money, pay the taxes from the escrow, sell the land for whatever they offer, and disappear. Start a new life somewhere else. No one would blame you. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can make this place your home, the way I always dreamed you would. It's a hard life I'm offering you, but it's a life of your own, on your own terms. Whatever you choose, know this: I never, ever stopped loving you. Every single day you were in my heart. I am so proud of the man you have become, Leo. And Sam, my sweet boy, look after your brother. You are all each other has. You are my legacy. Don't let them take it from you. The letter ended there. Signed, your loving grandmother, Evelyn. I finished reading, and the silence that followed was heavy and profound. The only sound was the drip of condensation somewhere in the dark. Sam was crying. Silent tears streamed down his face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. I wasn't much better. I cried for the grandmother I never got to know. I cried for the years of feeling abandoned and alone, which were not years of abandonment at all, but years of a fierce, hidden protection. I cried for her sacrifice, the lonely, heartbreaking choice she had made. She hadn't thrown us away. She had been our silent, unseen guardian angel, fighting a lonely war on our behalf. I gently folded the letter and placed it back on the stack. The cold, musty cellar no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a sanctuary, a fortress, a final gift from a woman with a will of iron. I looked at the money. I looked at the legal papers. I looked at Sam, his face illuminated by the shaky beam of the flashlight. The choice she laid out was so clear it was brutal. Run or fight. Easy comfort or the harder right. For a moment, the thought of taking the money was overwhelmingly tempting. We could get an apartment in a city, get jobs, be normal teenagers. We could leave Arbor Creek and the Blackwoods and the ghost of Evelyn Miller behind. We could be safe. But then I looked at the stone walls, the sturdy shelves, the pump in the corner. This place wasn't just land. It was a story, our story. It was the last piece of our family, the last thing our grandmother had to give us. Selling it would be like selling her memory. It would be like letting the Blackwoods win, not just the land, but the whole story. My whole body was trembling, a strange mix of grief and rage, and a terrifying, exhilarating hope. "What do we do?" I whispered, the question aimed at Sam, at myself, at the ghost in the room. Sam finally looked up from the box, his eyes red but clear. He wiped his nose on the back of his sleeve. He looked so young, but his gaze was steady. He reached into the box and didn't touch the money. He touched the letters. "She fought for this," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "She fought for us. We can't just run." He looked around the small stone room, at the dark, damp walls. "This is ours, Leo. This is home." And that was it. The moment of decision. The words of a 15-year-old kid cut through all my fear and doubt. He was right. Running was the old way, the foster care way. Moving on, never putting down roots, never fighting for anything because nothing was ever truly yours. This was ours. We were tired of running. A new feeling began to uncoil in my chest, something hot and strong that pushed back the cold fear. It was determination. "Okay," I said, my voice stronger now. "Okay, we stay. We fight." A slow smile spread across Sam's face, the first real smile I'd seen in days. It was like the sun coming out. In that cold, dark cellar, surrounded by the ghosts of our past and the uncertainty of our future, we had finally found our footing. We had a purpose. We had a home. Now I want to pause here for a second. If you've made it this far, thank you. This part of the story, this moment of choice, it hits me hard every time I tell it. Have you ever been at a crossroads like that, where you had to choose between the easy path and the one that felt right, even though it was 1,000 times harder? It's a moment that defines you. If you have a story like that, I'd be honored if you shared a piece of it in the Connect Us. And if this is resonating with you, please these real-life moments, the struggles that make us who we are. You're not alone in this. Now let's get back to what happened next. Because making the choice was one thing, surviving it was another. The first step was survival. We couldn't live in a damp cellar, not for long. And we couldn't stay in the woods in a flimsy tent with winter coming. The footlocker became our war chest. I did a quick count of the money. It was just over $20,000. To a kid who thought $100 was a fortune, it felt like millions. But I knew, listening to my grandmother's words echo in my head, that it had to last. It had to be our weapon, our shield, and our sustenance. We made a plan, sitting on the cold floor, our voices low and serious. First, pay the taxes. I found the envelope with the lawyer's information. Arthur Gable. The letter inside was from him, confirming he held a little over $5,000 in an account set up by Evelyn, specifically for the delinquent property taxes. She had thought of everything. She'd paid them in advance, in secret. The debt the county claimed we owed was already covered. We just had to file the paperwork. Second, supplies. We made a list. Heavy-duty sleeping bags, a propane stove, lanterns, waterproof clothing, tools, non-perishable food, everything we would need to turn this stone box into a livable space and to survive the coming winter. Third, information. We needed to understand what we were up against. The legal documents in the other envelopes were our ammunition. They were copies of deeds, survey maps, and correspondence between my grandmother and the Blackwood Development Corporation, a paper trail of their harassment. That night, we slept in the cellar. We laid out our old sleeping bags on the stone floor, the footlocker between us. We left the heavy doors propped open just a crack for air. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of falling. The cold stone around me didn't feel like a prison. It felt like armor. The next morning we hiked back to town. It felt different this time. We weren't lost and desperate. We had a mission. We walked into the same gas station, and the same flannel-shirted man was behind the counter. He looked at us, and I could see the question in his eyes. He probably expected us to be begging for a ride back to the bus station. "Need to use your phone," I said, putting $1 on the counter. "And can you tell us where to find Arthur Gable's office?" A flicker of surprise. "Gable? He's mostly retired. Works out of his house on Elm Street." He gave us the directions. I called the county tax office first. The woman on the other end was dismissive, her voice bored, until I gave her the parcel number and mentioned Arthur Gable's name. There was a pause. "Oh," she said, her tone changing completely. "Yes, Mr. Gable is handling that. Just have him file the payment confirmation from the escrow. The property is in good standing pending that paperwork." Good standing. The words were beautiful. The first small victory. Finding Mr. Gable's house was easy. It was a modest, well-kept home with a small brass plaque next to the door that read, "A. Gable, Attorney at Law." An elderly man with kind eyes and a fringe of white hair answered the door. He looked us up and down, his expression cautious. "We're Evelyn Miller's grandsons," I said. "Leo and Sam." His face softened instantly. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," he said, opening the door wider. Come in, come in." His office was a converted sunroom, filled with books and orderly stacks of paper. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. He sat us down and listened, his head tilted, as I explained everything. Finding the land, the cellar, the box, the letters. I showed him the letter addressed to him and the key to the escrow account. He nodded slowly, a sad smile on his face. "Evelyn was one of the most stubborn, brilliant women I've ever known," he said, his voice thick with affection. "She told me about her plan years ago. I thought she was crazy, hiding money in a root cellar, concocting this whole scheme. But she was determined to give you boys a fighting chance." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "She was right to be cautious. The Blackwoods are not to be trifled with. They've run this county for 50 years. They have friends in the courthouse, in the sheriff's department. They will not be happy to learn that Evelyn's land has passed to 2 heirs who intend to keep it." He promised to handle the tax paperwork immediately. He also gave us a stark warning. "They'll try to get you to sell. They'll start with a friendly offer. When you refuse, they'll get less friendly. They'll try to intimidate you, Find code violations. Challenge the survey again. Do not talk to them. Do not sign anything. You refer them to me. Understand? We nodded, the gravity of the situation settling in. This wasn't just about fixing up a cellar. This was a war, and we were the front-line soldiers. We left Mr. Gable's office feeling both emboldened and terrified. We had an ally, but we also had a powerful enemy. Our next stop was the town's only hardware store. We walked in with a list and a purpose. The owner, a man named Henderson, watched us with curiosity as we loaded a cart with propane tanks, heavy canvas tarps, a shovel, an axe, and work gloves. We were an odd sight. Two teenagers buying supplies for a construction site, not a camping trip. But as I paid in cash, peeling bills off a thick roll from my pocket, his curiosity turned into a quiet respect. Money talked, even in a town as small as Arbor Creek. The biggest purchase was a used pickup truck. We found it on a makeshift lot on the edge of town. It was a 20-year-old Ford, rusted and beat up, but the engine turned over and the price was right. $3,000 cash. Driving it back down the muddy track to our land, the truck rattling and groaning, I felt a surge of pride. It was ours. We were no longer dependent on buses or the kindness of strangers. We had our own wheels. We had our own land. We were building our own world, piece by piece. The next few weeks were a blur of hard physical labor. We worked from sunup to sundown. We scrubbed the stone walls of the cellar until they were clean. We built sturdy wooden bunk beds and a small table. We ran a ventilation pipe up through the earthen roof to ensure fresh air. We used the heavy tarps and timber from a fallen tree to build a crude but effective waterproof shelter over the cellar entrance, creating a small, dry entryway where we could store our tools and muddy boots. We dug a latrine a safe distance from the cellar and the well. Every muscle in my body ached. My hands were covered in blisters that turned into calluses. Sam, who I had always thought of as a skinny kid, started to develop muscles in his arms and shoulders. The work was grueling, but it was honest. Every swing of the axe, every shovelful of dirt, was an act of defiance. We were making this place ours, not with a deed, but with our own sweat and effort. We tested the water pump. After a few minutes of rusty, sputtering groans, a stream of clear, cold water gushed out. It tasted clean and pure, the best water I'd ever had. Evelyn's treasure, our lifeline. One afternoon, as we were splitting firewood, a shiny black SUV, the kind that looks completely out of place on a muddy forest road, pulled up to the edge of our property. A man in a tailored suit and polished shoes got out. He looked uncomfortable, his expensive clothes a stark contrast to the wildness of the woods. "Leo Martin?" he called out, his voice smooth and practiced. I walked over, my axe still in my hand. "I am," I said. "I'm Robert Blackwood," he said, extending a hand I didn't take. "My family's company has been in talks with the previous owner about this parcel for some time. I was sorry to hear of her passing. We'd like to extend our offer to you. We can offer you a very generous price, enough for you and your brother to get a fresh start somewhere new." He named a number. It sounded big, bigger than the cash in the box. For a fleeting second, the image of an easy life flashed in my mind again. But then I looked past him, at the cellar, at the pile of firewood Sam and I had stacked. I thought of my grandmother's letter. "This land is not for sale," I said, my voice steady. "Please direct any further inquiries to our lawyer, Arthur Gable." Blackwood's smile tightened. It didn't reach his eyes. "That would be a mistake, son," he said, his voice losing its friendly veneer. This land is more trouble than it's worth. You're just kids. You don't know what you're getting into." "We know exactly what we're getting into," I said. "Now, you're on private property." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes cold and assessing. Then he turned, got back in his shiny SUV, and drove away, leaving a trail of exhaust fumes hanging in the clean forest air. The first shot had been fired. The war had begun. The aftermath of Blackwood's visit was a tense, watchful quiet. We knew they wouldn't give up, but we didn't know what their next move would be. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. The leaves turned from green to brilliant shades of red and gold, then fell, carpeting the forest floor. Winter was no longer a threat on the horizon. It was at our doorstep. Our little cellar became our haven. With the propane stove for cooking and a small, well-vented propane heater for warmth, it was surprisingly cozy. The stone walls held the heat, and the silence of the earth around us was a comfort. We developed a routine. We woke up with the sun, spent the day chopping wood, reinforcing our shelter, and exploring our 5 acres, marking the boundaries, learning the contours of our small kingdom. In the evenings, we would read by the light of a lantern. I read my grandmother's letters over and over, absorbing her story, her strength. Sam, who had always struggled in school, devoured books we picked up from a thrift store in town. Novels, history books, anything he could get his hands on. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of competence. We were doing it. We were surviving. We were making a life. Our trips to town became strategic. We'd go once a week in our beat-up truck to stock up on supplies, get mail from the P.O. box Mr. Gable had helped us set up, and check in with him. The townspeople started to recognize us. We were the Miller boys, the 2 kids who lived out in the woods. Their suspicions slowly turned into a kind of grudging respect. We weren't causing trouble. We were just there, working. Henderson, the hardware store owner, started giving me a discount. The woman from the church, whose name we learned was Mrs. Gable, Arthur's wife, would always press a bag of homemade cookies into Sam's hands when she saw us. We weren't friends, not yet, but we were becoming part of the landscape. One day, a certified letter arrived at our P.O. box. It was from the county planning office. It was a notice of violation. An anonymous complaint had been filed about an unpermitted subterranean structure and improper sanitation on our property. The fine was $1,000, with the threat of further legal action if the violations weren't corrected. I knew immediately who was behind it. "Anonymous complaint, my ass," I muttered, showing the letter to Sam. "It's the Blackwoods." We drove straight to Mr. Gable's house. He read the letter, his lips pressed into a thin, angry line. "I was afraid of this," he said. "They're going to try to bleed you dry, bury you in paperwork and fines." But he wasn't defeated. He was a fighter. "Don't worry," he said, tapping the letter. "This is my territory. The structure is pre-existing. It predates the county's current zoning laws by at least 70 years. It's grandfathered in. As for the sanitation, we can file for a permit for a modern septic system, but a latrine on a 5-acre rural plot is hardly a public nuisance. This is harassment, plain and simple. Let me handle it." And he did. He spent the next month exchanging letters with the county, citing obscure precedents and regulations. The fine was eventually dropped, the violation notice rescinded. It was another victory, but a draining one. It cost us time, and it cost Mr. Gable energy. We saw the strategy clearly now. The Blackwoods weren't going to storm our land with bulldozers. They were going to use the system against us, twisting the rules, using their influence to make our lives impossible, hoping we'd eventually break and sell. It was a war of attrition. The first snow fell in late November. We woke up one morning to a world transformed, covered in a thick, silent blanket of white. The cellar was warm, but the moment we stepped outside, the cold was a physical shock. The work became harder. Chopping wood in the snow was exhausting. The dirt road became a treacherous mess of ice and mud, making our trips to town a white-knuckle affair. The isolation deepened. For days at a time, we would see no one, hear nothing but the wind in the bare trees. Doubt began to creep back in. Were we crazy? Two kids, living in a hole in the ground, trying to fight a rich, powerful family? There were days when the warmth of a normal apartment, the ease of a normal life, felt like an impossible dream. On one of those days, when the snow was coming down thick and I was feeling the full weight of our isolation, Sam came to me. He was holding one of the books he'd been reading. It was a textbook on sustainable agriculture. "Look at this," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. He pointed to a chapter on greenhouse construction. "We could build one, right on the south-facing slope by the big rocks. We could grow our own food, all year round." I looked at the diagrams, then at his hopeful face. He wasn't thinking about surviving the winter. He was thinking about the spring. He was thinking about planting things. He was thinking about the future. His hope was a fire, and it warmed me better than the propane heater ever could. "Yeah," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "Yeah, we could." That conversation was a turning point. We stopped thinking only about defense and started thinking about building. We were no longer just holding on. We were putting down roots. We spent the long winter evenings planning. We drew up designs for a small cabin to build on top of the cellar, using the cellar as its foundation. We researched solar panels, septic systems, everything we would need to be truly self-sufficient. The land wasn't just a fortress anymore. It was becoming a home, a homestead. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and turning the woods into a riot of green, it felt like a resurrection. We had survived. We had made it through the winter on our own terms. The first thing we did was start clearing the land for the greenhouse, just like Sam had planned. The work was hard, but it felt joyful. We weren't just fighting against something anymore. We were building something. For us. For our future. I looked at the progress we had made. The secure cellar, the stacks of firewood, the sturdy truck, the plans for the future. I thought about the two scared kids who had gotten off that bus 6 months earlier, with nothing but $100 and a piece of paper. It felt like a lifetime ago. We had been forged in that cellar, in that winter. We were no longer boys. We were becoming men, and we were home. The fight with the Blackwoods wasn't over. We knew it was just a temporary lull. But something inside me had shifted. The fear was still there, but it no longer owned me. It was just a background noise. The foreground was filled with the sound of an axe splitting wood, the sight of Sam's determined face, the feel of the solid earth beneath my feet. This place had given us more than just shelter. It had given us a purpose. It had given us a connection to our past and a stake in our future. My grandmother had given us a choice, and we had chosen the harder path. But in doing so, we had found something we never knew we were looking for. A sense of belonging. We belonged to this land, and it belonged to us. I often think about the word inheritance. Before, I thought it just meant money or property, something you're given. But now I know that's not true. A real inheritance isn't something you're given. It's something you're trusted with. It's a legacy you have to earn. A story you have to choose to be a part of. Evelyn didn't just leave us 5 acres of woods. She left us a choice. She trusted us to be strong enough to make the right one. And in that trust, she gave us back our family. She gave us back ourselves. The cellar was just the beginning. It was the seed. The real work was everything that came after. The choice to stay, the will to fight, the hope to build. It saved us not by hiding us, but by forcing us to stand up and claim our place in the world. As I'm telling you this, years have passed. The greenhouse Sam dreamed up stands on the south slope, its panes of glass gleaming in the sun. Inside, rows of vegetables grow, even in the dead of winter. The small cabin we designed is no longer just a drawing. It's real. It sits directly over the cellar, which now serves as our basement and pantry. Its stone walls a constant reminder of where we started. The cabin is modest, built with timber we cleared from our own land, but it's solid and warm. It has solar panels on the roof and a proper septic system, all permitted and approved, much to the Blackwoods' chagrin. The legal battles continued for years. They tried everything Mr. Gable predicted. They sent surveyors who tried to move our property lines. They filed frivolous lawsuits. They tried to get our road access revoked. But we had a good lawyer, the truth on our side, and a growing network of support. The people of Arbor Creek, who had once been suspicious strangers, saw the fight we were putting up. They saw the Blackwoods for the bullies they were. Henderson from the hardware store started extending us credit. Mrs. Gable organized a bake sale to help with our legal fees. We weren't just the Miller boys anymore. We were Leo and Sam. We were their neighbors. We found a community we never expected. Sam is in college now, studying agricultural science. He comes home on weekends and in the summer, his head full of new ideas for crop rotation and water conservation. He's going to make this land thrive in a way my grandmother could only have dreamed of. I stayed. I run a small business selling organic produce and firewood to people in the surrounding towns. I even sell to the gas station where we first arrived all those years ago. The flannel-shirted man, whose name is Carl, is one of our best customers. The Blackwood Corporation eventually gave up. After a final failed lawsuit, they turned their attention to other valleys, other holdouts. We had cost them too much money and exposed too much of their ugliness to the community. We won. But winning wasn't a single moment of victory. It was the 1,000 small moments. The first winter survived, the first tomato harvested, the day the final court case was dismissed. The real victory is the quiet morning, sitting on the porch of the cabin we built, drinking coffee and looking out at the woods that are ours. It's knowing that my brother is getting an education I could help provide. It's the feeling of peace that comes from having roots, from knowing exactly where you belong. This journey taught me that home isn't a place you find, it's a place you make. It's a choice you make every single day, to fight for it, to nurture it, to build it, even if you're starting with nothing but a hole in the ground and a promise from a ghost. Our grandmother gave us a chance, but we are the ones who turned that chance into a life. And I think she would be proud. So I want to ask you one last thing. What does home mean to you? Is it a building, a memory, a person, a feeling? Does your stories matter? They are part of this larger story we are all living. Thank you for listening to mine. If it moved you, if it made you of this community, we're all just trying to find our way home, and maybe we can help each other navigate the dark roads and find the hidden cellars waiting for us.